Hi, welcome back to Elle McNicoll's lockdown writing class. I am Elle McNicoll. I am the author of A Kind of Spark and Show Us Who You Are, which is out on the 4th of March, World Book Day this year. Hopefully going to get some copies of it in soon, hopefully. Welcome back. Thank you so much to those of you who did the assignment from last class and the one before. I'm still getting a few great lists. I'm still getting some great pitches. But I also got some great stuff about character, which was part A that we did last time, and I just want to read out one that I really liked, one that really got to the heart of what we were trying to do. And this person has said, my character wants, so we talked about wants, we talked about objectives, my character wants a friend to fit in to save the world, which I think is awesome because that's basically what Cora wants in Show Us Who You Are. And they said, my character is scared of things going wrong, people finding out his secret, which is brilliant. And obviously we as the reader don't even know what that secret is, but you do, and that's fantastic. And you know, if those two things could collide, if you could get a friend but then the friend finds out the secret, then you've got two things coming together, and not only does that have great character stuff in it, then that becomes plot. So that's excellent. Well done, and thank you for sending me that. Thank you to everyone who has sent me things. It's incredible, and I'm so glad you're engaging and that this is helping in any way, whether it's just for fun or if you're actually learning anything. Who knows? But I just want to say a massive big thank you. So, whoa, it's been a tricky old week, so I'm really excited to be here with you and talking about this, which is all good fun. We're going to talk about part B now, character. And remember last time I was talking about Alexandra Shepherd's great book, Oh My Gods, and we were talking about how that has Greek mythology in it and it has demigods and Greek gods. Well, that actually leads on really well into what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about, let me see if I say this word right, because I've only ever read it, I've never heard it said out loud, Hamatia, or Hamatia. Hamatia, which, if we use the English version, means fatal flaw. So, what is a fatal flaw? Well, the most classic example goes back to Greek mythology. It goes back to Achilles. I'm sure some of you know about Achilles. Achilles is a demigod and fought with the Greeks against the Trojans in the Iliad by Homer, and he has probably, I mean, it's named after him really, the ultimate fatal flaw, his heel, the Achilles heel. When we talk about Achilles heel, we're talking about Achilles, we're literally talking about his heel. So if you know the story, he was dipped in the river Styx, and the only part of him that wasn't dipped in the water that would protect him from dying is his heel. So it's the one part of his body which is vulnerable. And that's a really important thing to think about if you're writing an epic story, but if you're writing any kind of story, what is your character's fatal flaw? Maybe it's not even a fatal flaw, maybe it's just a weakness. You know, that word weakness. What is it? What's the thing that can bring them down? Especially if they're a very capable character or a very strong character. You know, unfortunately for Achilles, he was shot in his heel. He had an arrow fired into his heel, and it killed him because that was his one weak spot. So your character, it doesn't have to be that literal. They don't need to have, like, I don't know, maybe it could. Maybe they have an elbow or I don't know, like an ear that is completely vulnerable compared to the rest of them. But more metaphorically, I think, is what we're thinking about. What is their metaphorical weakness? What's the thing that makes them vulnerable? Because vulnerability is a really important part of character. One of the easiest mistakes to make when you're writing your first ever protagonist is to make them too perfect. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about in this session. It's very tempting to do. It's tempting to make them good looking, clever, good at everything. You know, they're good at sport, they're good at their hobbies, they're good at, you know, at school, they are funny, they are nice, they are loved universally by everybody, they are, you know, they know the answers to everything without having to think about it. Like, it's tempting when you first write a story to make that your main character, and some people do it without even realizing they're doing it. But the reason that I don't think that works so well is, first of all, I don't think anybody like that exists. I know that there's definitely people that we all see and we think, wow, that person is just perfect. They're just good at everything, and they are, you know, happy all the time, and they are smart and funny and nice, and they do everything brilliantly. That's our perception. That's not reality. And I bet if you asked that person, they would not tell you that they are a perfect person. Maybe they would, maybe they're a raging narcissist, but, you know, maybe in which case they probably wouldn't be very nice. So I think it's really important with all of your characters, but especially your protagonist, your main character, the person we're going to be spending all this time with. It's really important to go, okay, this is, you know, probably a good person. If you're writing, you know, a story, you probably want your protagonist to be the hero and be good. That's an assumption. But what's their flaws? What are their flaws? What are the things that make them human? You know, maybe they have a bad temper. Or maybe, you know, in Addie's case, Addie's quite naive and she doesn't think things through till the end. So there's a chapter in the book where she takes off after her sister and goes into town by herself, which is a bit impulsive and a little naive and not, you know, a very worldly decision. So, or, you know, like I said, Kitty has a very bad temper. Cora in Show Us Who You Are has a very quick temper and closes herself off a lot when she feels sort of vulnerable. Maybe they, I don't know, maybe they smell really bad. I don't know, like, it's just something that makes them human, something that, and hopefully something that can then impact the plot a little bit, you know. We were talking about that great suggestion about a character that has a secret. Are they secretive? Do they not open themselves up fully to other people? Do they tell lies? Is that something that they find themselves doing a lot? Are they having a difficult time telling the truth? There's all kinds of trouble you can get into story-wise and plot-wise if you have a character that is not truthful. And that, you know, in the literary world we call that an unreliable narrator. So when the main character in the story, and maybe it's told in first person, so I, me, I, they're unreliable. So the story they're telling the readers is not necessarily the truth, it's just their version of the truth. That's another great thing to think of. I don't really want to get into it too much now because we'll talk about it in point of view, but it's something to think about of there's the way that your character sees the world, there's the way other people see your character, and then there's the truth. So there's 3 stories, but we'll talk about that in another class. So it's a good thing to think about flaws. You know, their flaws don't have to be something that's going to get them into trouble. It could just be, you know, Nina in A Kind of Spark, she's just a bit vain. That's her flaw. She's a bit self-obsessed and a bit self-absorbed. So it's really important just to kind of not go on the track of writing a main character that is perfect in every single way, because I promise you, with the exception of Mary Poppins, people who are practically perfect in every single way don't tend to make very interesting main characters. Not a lot can really happen if somebody is too smart to ever get into trouble, is too capable, you know, to ever stay in trouble, and is too, you know, perfect that you don't really care if they're in trouble or not. You know, it can get a little bit boring, a little bit samey, a bit predictable, and it's not actually that much fun to write. So find yourself a nice, flawed, but still lovable human character, and you will find that protagonist story a lot more easy to tell, I promise. So, flaws, that's what's really important. And like I said, there's also weaknesses and, you know, fatal flaws, but that's not so necessary if you're telling, you know, a contemporary story, if you're telling a story that's not necessarily epic in proportion. You know, none of my characters are going to get taken down by an arrow in battle, but it's something to maybe think about, like, what are the wider perceptions of a fatal flaw? You know, that thing that will get a character into trouble, that thing that they're destined to you know, to be brought down by. And the third part of this, so we've got fatal flaws and we've got just flaws in general that will create an interesting character who's dynamic and realistic. The third I want you to think about is, and I'm going to use a word, and that is a wound. Okay? Now, this, if you're writing a character who is maybe your age or a character who is you know, younger, like, you know, Addie, you know, is 11. Addie does not have a wound. There's no wound. She's a very young, optimistic, sometimes even sheltered person. She doesn't have a wound. She's too young. But Cora does have a wound in Show Us Who You Are. And I'm trying to think of, I won't use Cora as an example because I don't want to give away the plot, but a wound is when a character has something inside them that hurts them, that they are hurt by and that they sort of carry with them. It's like a heaviness on them, and it's probably something that they don't want to talk about very often, and it's probably something that upsets them a little bit. I give, without fail, every single adult character I write in my books has a wound inside, and that really kind of, they never talk about it openly, but it really kind of steers their behaviour, and it really helps me as a writer work out, okay, what would they do here? Would they, you know, it's definitely something that adults carry more than children, and don't ask any of the adults in your life. Don't go up to them and go, what's your wound, parent or guardian? What is it that you carry with you? Don't. But, you know, it doesn't have to be something huge or incredibly sad. It just has to be something a little, again, that word, vulnerability, just a little bit of vulnerability that they carry inside them. What is it? You know that thing that if someone pressed it really hard would make them go, you know, oh gosh, don't want to talk about that, don't want to think about that. That's a really helpful thing for me to write, especially when I'm writing older characters, to think what's happened to this person that's made them a little bit guarded or a little bit cautious about certain things. So we've got fatal flaws, we've got character flaws, and we've got wound. That, along with your objectives and whatever your character's afraid of, that is going to give you so much material to get your character through this story. Maybe too much material, maybe they have way too many issues, maybe they have way too much going on, so you can just pick and choose what you need. But I find that those things, before I set off writing, really help me. And remember last time I said I was about to start a project, and I was, you know, I hadn't quite worked out what the character wanted yet. Well, I did what I was asking you guys to do. I sat down and I thought about, you know, I looked at my plot outline and my synopsis, which is what we'll get to next week because we're doing plot, and I thought, okay, and I found out what the character wanted, and everything just clicked. I was like, oh, okay, now I know, and now I feel ready to start writing it. I know what the character wants now. I know where they're, you know, despite all the action that's going to be happening to them, I know what's going to be directing them. So that's really helped me, and I really hope that it's helped some of you as well. So yeah, for our next class, we're going to be doing plot, which again will be 2 sessions, A and B, because plot is so important and so integral. There's so much to talk about. So the task for the end of this week is to write down your character's wound, if they have one. Write down their flaws. That's probably going to be the easiest thing. So are they clumsy? I'm, you know, part of being neurodivergent means I am very clumsy. I don't think of it really as a flaw, but maybe you do. So maybe that's something that your character has. Maybe they get jealous a lot. Maybe they have problems with jealousy. Maybe they aren't a very good listener, or maybe they're very, very shy. Again, I don't think that's really a flaw, but it is something that, you know, can make the action a bit more exciting, especially if you're in the character's head. So I just want you to think about what your character's flaws are, and then what their vulnerabilities are. And then just make a little list alongside your list where you have your objectives and what they're afraid of. And then by the time you've done that, you'll have, I think, what I would call the core of a character, the real core of a character. And then you can start doing all your superficial things like what they look like, what they sound like. And then you have your protagonist, and hopefully you'll be ready to go. Great. So I was thinking about who's an author that writes really great characters, really great lead characters, and one of, you know, the first names that came into my head and stayed there was Aisha Bushby, who wrote Pocketful of Stars and Moonchild, you know, and Amira is a great protagonist, as is Sophia in Pocketful of Stars, because they're just so gutsy and just, I hope Aisha doesn't mind me saying this, but they are flawed, you know, they are not, you know, cardboard cutout perfect people. And I hope that isn't offensive, because I actually think that's such a strength, and it makes the story so interesting, and it makes the plot move really readily. So I really recommend Moonchild if you are looking for a read. Aisha writes the most brilliant characters. Pocketful of Stars as well. It's hidden in my bookshelf somewhere, but it is fantastic. It really grabbed me from the first chapter. So she writes protagonists phenomenally well. And today's bookshop is going to be one of my favourites back in Edinburgh, which is my hometown. And it is a shop called Toppings. There are a few Toppings out in the UK. I think there's one in St Andrews, there's one in Bath, but Toppings in Edinburgh is relatively new, and it is so gorgeous. It's like a bookshop from a fairy tale. You just walk in and there's wall-to-wall books and ladders, and the staff are incredible, and they make pots of tea, and I just love it so much, and I just wanted to shout them out because they are fantastic. So this week's bookshop is Toppings in Edinburgh, and they may be doing click and collect now because we're in lockdown. I'm not entirely sure because I'm in London, I'm not in Edinburgh, but when bookshops open again, they are phenomenal, and I think you should really check them out if you can. So, thank you. Tasks. Let's write out our fatal flaws, if there are any. Again, that's not, you know, so essential, but Achilles' heel is a good way to think about flaws. It's a good reference point. What are their vulnerabilities, their wounds? What are the things that make them a perfectly imperfect person and a character that we want to read about. And then we're going to put that in with our objectives and our fears, and it is like a recipe. We're going to put it all in, and we're going to have a character, and we're going to be ready to start on plot. So I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.